Hi, so this is the video on the Second Intermediate Period. Now I'm also going to cover very quickly the 13th Dynasty. So with the fall of the Middle Kingdom, the 13th Dynasty did try to carry on the Middle Kingdom, but they failed, and they did adopt a lot of names from the 12th Dynasty, like Amni and Sobek. You can clearly see in that they had about 8 or 9 rulers, and they were ruling from Italy, but it didn't succeed. One thing is for sure, looking at the satellite imagery, you can see lots of unfinished ground plans of pyramids. So every ruler, there was about 8 or 9 of them, started off a pyramid project. It was never finished because they didn't last long, and then it was abandoned. So each one of them tried to carry on building pyramids. That's their link, and their mission as a living Horus is to build that link between themselves and the gods, the Egyptian people and the gods, which is probably why they carried on building pyramids, even if they weren't finishing them. So a second intermediate period happens with their fall. And remember, these intermediate periods are times when different parts of Egypt are ruled from different places. The north, the Delta area, was ruled by a 14th dynasty and a 15th dynasty, and they're known as the Hyksos. The Hyksos translate as the shepherds kings. Also, it can mean rulers of the foreign lands. Now, these people, going back to when we looked at the first intermediate period, these people were probably migrants from the Canaanite areas. So they left Canaan because of famine, and they came into Egypt during the reign of Amenhotep I. Remember, Amenhotep I built a wall between the desert and Egypt to control the influx of migrants. So these people settled in the Delta area. They lived in Egypt. They became Egyptianized. When you look at it, you're talking about over 300 years. So that's a good 7 to 9 generations of being Egyptianized. But they did bring with them their ideas of warfare and how they built their cities. They built a city in the Delta called Avaris, and it was slightly different from other Egyptian cities. It was built on a mound with tall walls. It had gypsum on the outside of the mound to make it very difficult to attack the city. It had a small gateway and a pathway coming down the mound. One of the things that they introduced into Egypt that the Egyptians had never used in warfare was chariots, and also headgear, helmets, scale armor to stop arrows, a new kind of battle axe that you put into somebody's head or chest rather than the stone flint axes that the Egyptians are using, swords made out of bronze. So those are the sorts of military changes that are happening in Egypt. The Hyksos used tambourines and lutes as in their music. They introduced the anvil for metalworking and the bellows to burn charcoal. So that's what they were about. Certainly a different culture to what was in Egypt before, and this has developed up over 300 odd years. If you look at one of their leaders called Khan, it's been suggested that Khan actually had an influence and a rule not just in the Delta but also in Canaan, going right the way up to Lebanon. And you know, they're all Semitic people, so there is a link there, and that could be a possibility. So the Lower Egypt during this time was annexed from Upper Egypt itself. I wonder how the rest of the Lower Egyptians felt about that. Anyway, in the south at Italy, there is a 16th dynasty ruling Upper Egypt, and there are conflicts between the Hyksos and the 16th dynasty, and the allies of the Hyksos are the Kushites. Kushites down in modern day Sudan are allied to the Hyksos. And somewhere in those conflicts, the Hyksos invade Upper Egypt. The 16th dynasty is decimated, and they even invade right the way down into Waset, who was allied to the 16th dynasty. A short time later, can't say exactly when, but the people in Waset, the leaders of Waset, had enough, and they declared themselves as a 17th dynasty under under a leader called Ahmose. Well, he was Ahmose the Elder. Let's call him Ahmose the Elder. Sequenta Ahmose, his name is. After him came Sequenta Tau, and then Kamose. Now, Lord Carnarvon and Howard Carter found a stele in Waset that Kamose had commissioned, and he said, "We have enemies to our north, the Hyksos, enemies to our south, the Kushites. That's enough. Let's kick off." So he campaigned in Nubia against the Kushites, and he also recruited from what the Romans called Nubia. So the distance between the first cataract, which is the obstacle in the River Nile, just past Elephantine, going down into Sudan, the Romans called that Nubia. But as far as the Egyptians were concerned, they called it Kush. In between that area are African people called the Medjai, and that's where Kamose recruited from, that strip. So maybe they're still controlling the gold mines, or they had a relationship, family relationships, going back to the 11th dynasty. Anyway, that's where he recruited his bowmen from, his shock troops. Remember that each city would have only have had access to a limited amount of troops. And this is a case of nationalism. They want to expel the foreigners, the Hyksos. They want to bring Lower Egypt back into the Nebtawi, the Twin Lands. And they want to keep these Kushites down. Okay. There are always lots of different views in life between nations and civilizations. And why don't people just sit down and get on? You know, but there we are, 40,000 years of warfare between us. We're still divided with all this nonsense. But anyway, Kamose is succeeded by his brother called Ahmose. And Ahmose carries on the campaign against the Hyksos. So we must assume that they decimate the Kushites in Sudan, secure their border before they can then campaign against the Hyksos. And I should imagine it was very much about nationalism, about uniting the two lands under one Egyptian king, that these foreigners, these migrants had been invited into Egypt, and they've been given a home, and 300 odd years later they decide that they want to rule part of their country. Anyway, Ahmose secures Avaris, probably under siege rather than attacking the city. The leadership is expelled, just the leadership, and then he pursues them to a town in the Canaan called Sharon, where he totally obliterates the family. So the Hyksos, the Egyptianized Hyksos who still live in Avaris, providing they're pledging loyalty to Ahmose, he's letting them stay, he's letting them live in Lower Egypt. But the hierarchy are completely decimated at Sharon in the Canaanite area. And then Ahmose becomes the first king of the 18th dynasty and the new kingdom, the big glory days to come. And that's where we'll leave it for the moment. So that's a brief explanation of the changes that happened during the second intermediate period and what happened. Please press your subscribe button, and I'll see you very soon. Bye for now.